Live and all right, let's do it. Let's have try to have a good conversation tonight. A little bit late notice, but I think you have an interesting topic that we can open with, Michael, and maybe we afterwards we can do a second topic as well if you guys want to. So do you wanna say some words about the topic, introduce the topic, Michael, about education and
Yeah, so it's something not just education, but just raising kids in general is originally what I had thought. So like how to should you raise kids stricter? So should you be more lenient? Should you be somewhere in the middle? How do you discipline
so
your kids?
you wanna sorry, go ahead.
Oh, it's all right. So yeah, that's one component, and then another is like how much risk should you expose them to? Um, should you how much should you protect them versus expose them to risk? And how much should you teach them versus having them learn it on their own? So a bunch of different questions, but yeah.
Yeah, that was a lot of different questions, but it's good. It's good. So yeah, which one should we start with?
Which one do you guys like?
My daughter is 27 and I cannot teach her anything. She learns everything on her own the hard way.
Yeah, so and this goes back to education too. There's teaching people things verbally by just spelling it out. And then there's kind of learning through observation or like observing your parents do it. Um, and then there's just learning on your own without any assistance. So yeah, that's one interesting question.
Yeah.
How much do you try to tell your kids versus how much do you kind of leave them to their own devices to figure out stuff on their own? Yeah. It's kind of, maybe it's too generic of a question. I don't know.
Let me put it this way. I probably should have taken that approach about 20 years ago.
But which one? Leaving them to their own device?
Toughening them up.
Toughening them up.
Yeah. Making sure they could learn on their own adequately.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, I would have been just as uncertain now as had I done it that way that I, you know, if anybody suggests to you that they know what they're doing,
Yeah.
They're lying.
Yeah,
They're
they
lying
are.
to themselves, even.
Yeah.
You know, and I think kids are pretty resilient as long as you don't abuse them to the point that you create trauma. They'll be, if they're going to be fine, they're going to be fine. If they're going to grow up with a some kind of disorder, they're going to grow up with a disorder. It's at least my experience. I've got two kids, and that's when you realize that children have different personalities, and there's nothing you can do to change their personality. If you can just steer them a little bit and kind of keep them away from total disaster, but there's nothing you can really do.
So like as a parent, do you think your role is mainly provide for their basic needs, like feed them, clothe them and stuff like that? But aside from that, do you think there's not too much else a parent needs to do?
No, there's a lot more. The early socialization is very important, even before they go to school. That's when the brain is really forming, and that's when synapses are it's very critical that you at the very least stimulate them, talk to them regularly, because there's only a small window where they can develop those skills, and if you know, and also the ability to socialize, the ability to bond emotionally, you know.
So like when you have a really young kid, like 1 or 2 years old, is the idea that like you should try to expose them to bring them in a lot of different situations and expose them to a lot of environments so that they'll like soak in the information, they'll learn the language. Like how do you like accelerate their growth or at least like support it?
Well, I don't think at that age that this sort of like really what do you call this, very diverse stimulation is going to help that much. I mean, it's but you just have to. The only important thing is to talk to them and relate to them like you would any normal human being who's living with you. Don't just come home and let them sit in the corner and you know and stay on their own, and there's a lot more leeway, I believe. You know.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's the question for both David and Raul. How different are you raising your kids than you were raised? Looks like we
Very.
lost Bruno. Apparently, I'm the host now. I think we lost Bruno.
He'll come back.
Accurate.
Mhm.
Oh, here he comes again.
Yeah, I got disconnected for a second. My internet sucks, like always. But yeah, I hope that didn't stop you guys from talking.
No.
I think one of the things that's difficult for me, and it may not be difficult for others, but for the last couple of years with our daughter, as a parent, we want to know everything, but then I also reflect on when I was 25 to 27.
Yeah.
What did I keep from my mom and dad? There has to be some room there.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So I guess another question I had is like, is it good to teach children to be like really obedient, or is it can that backfire sometimes? Is it better to give them like some leeway? And the answer is probably somewhere in the middle, but just curious your thoughts.
Yeah. No, if you want them to do something, I think I have to explain to them why it is important that they do it. It's just not, you do it because we say so, although sometimes if you're tired and you run out of patience because I say so, that's very convenient. As to the question, did I raise our kids different from how I was raised? Well, for one thing, we didn't indoctrinate them in any religion. Well, I grew up in a very Catholic family, and that's a big difference, I think. Otherwise, yeah.
That's an interesting question. What do you guys think about like religion? Like, is it necessarily bad to raise them with a specific religion in mind, or like maybe you raise them on a certain religion, but then at a certain age you tell them that they can like choose it again? I'm not sure, but it is kind of interesting how you're kind of born into this like family that has this belief system.
Right. And no, we were the opposite. We said, we're not going to have you join any religion, and then when you decide if you want to, we're not going to stop you. We're not going to be mad at you about it. But And if you ask me why I choose not to have a religion, I can answer your question. You know, it's hard because religion is taught to you from the day you're born, you know, and I think it constricts your the way you think
Although many parents would,
considerably.
though many parents would consider that as part of their identity, and they want their
Yes.
children to have the same identity as they do,
Yes,
or to
absolutely.
continue on that identity.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tricky because it's hard to separate, because religion has many aspects. So it's hard to separate the cultural part. You're just
Right.
imparting some culture, the identity part, like, but like they're saying, and it's hard to differentiate that part from a different part, which is basically the dogma, right? That you're
Yeah.
imparting like this dogma. This is like this because God says so, or this is like this because the Bible says so, or this is like this because the priest says so,
Yeah.
that's kind of a different part. So, but it's hard to tell them apart, to completely separate them, because at the end of the day, everything comes from the same source. And
Mhm.
you go to church, and it's not like they're separating. Oh, we're culturally Catholic on the one hand, but on the other hand, you don't need to believe in the Bible. That's not really how it works when you go to church, right? Or any other religion. So it's hard to separate those things.
Yeah, I think for a lot of parents, especially the devout ones, there really is great fear that their children's souls will burn in hell if they don't, if they don't have them join the religion. I think that's what really drives them. And it's
But I
everything-
guess on the other hand, like going back to maybe what Bruno was saying, like I almost feel like if you don't teach your kid a religion, they're a lot less likely to relate to any of the religions. And maybe that's just okay. Like, yeah, so what? Like, who needs religion, right? But it's just a point. Like, you tend to be more attached to things that you grow up with and you resonate with.
I think personally that good critical thinking skills are paramount.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter what else you teach, as long as you have a good foundation of critical thinking.
Right.
I would agree. Like for example, I don't have a problem with people teaching their kids to be Catholic or Christians or of any kind, but then that shouldn't interfere with you giving someone the ability or the choice to figure out issues like for example, abortion. Not just doing something because someone says so, but rather having an opinion that you can defend, that you can formulate, that you can do it in an intellectual way, or for example, science. Not teaching someone evolution, the theory of evolution, because you're afraid that's going to spoil their Christian education, right? I think that's like going really hard into that dogma part, and I think we should avoid that.
You guys might be familiar. There was a woman named Lucretia Mott. She was very active in the early women's suffrage movement, and she had a quote. I think I'm sure I'm butchering it, but this is the flavor of it. I think she said something like, "Look to truth for authority, not to authority for truth."
No, that's a good quote. I like that. That's a brilliant quote.
So how do you build good
If you
critical
lived in
thinking?
that should be a guiding principle in an ideal world.
Yeah, but this is one of the big philosophical questions: is what is truth? I mean,
Yeah. Like a lot of truth has to start with an authority, because like otherwise you don't know where the starting point is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well-
Truth doesn't come with a label on it. That's the problem.
Yeah.
So
But I think
you
since
can keep
we're
searching for truth, and I fully accept that we may never Might not even recognize it when it hits us in the face.
But since we're partial to philosophy, I think the whole idea of philosophy, right? There are many definitions of philosophy. I think it's pointless to try to figure out exactly what it is. But one thing that I think is very important is the idea that you should have discussions where logic is your starting point, right? You're trying to discern things through logic rather than just relying on a piece of authority.
Sure.
So in that case, I guess we could still say, well, the source is logic, and I guess you do have to have some sort of pillar, but logic is a pretty good pillar.
But logic doesn't
Good
tell
foundation.
you what, like you have the is-ought problem, right? Logic doesn't tell you where you should get, like let's take a basic principle, treat others the way you would want to be treated. There's no way to derive that from logic. You kind of have to just say, we want this to, like, yeah, you
But
can't
you-
derive. Oh, I'm sorry, go on.
You can from cause and effect.
Yeah, I think you can. I disagree with you on that, Michael.
We don't have to treat each other the way we want to be treated. We could all start a war and be violent, and then the world
And then
would
we all
be
die.
like-
So
Yeah,
that's not
yeah,
logical, right?
Yeah,
Right,
yeah,
but that cause and
except-
effect is, if somebody does something to me, I'm likely to do that back to them, so therefore, what are the causes, what are the effects? Once you can establish that, you can say, okay, well, maybe, I mean, that also involves other steps that, there's childhood development, such as developing empathy.
Right. The only thing about logic is that, and I asked this before, how do we know that the rules of logic are right? that we arrive at, and we only know because it works well enough. So far, if we, for example, we may take the basic assumptions of A equals A and law of excluded middle and whatever, those 3 or 4 things that Bertrand Russell came up with, which, like she said, this is the basis of all logic, and we don't know if that's, you cannot test the effectiveness of a system of belief within the system of belief. You have to step outside and look, well, does it work well? And I think the system
And hope
of
you
logic,
can get back in.
yeah. And the system of logic that we have used seems to have worked well. It's got us to the moon. It's gotten us the modern conveniences of life. It's extended our lifespan, made life more comfortable. But yeah, so we have to be logical, but understand the logical system that we use is.
And apparently it
works.
was good for the species because
Yeah.
we went from a bottleneck of a few thousand human
Exactly.
beings to over 7 billion.
Yeah, we're still here.
Yeah.
Right, but this comes down to question, there's short and long term. I mean, we don't know. And maybe it's not for us humans to know whether it's good to have that many humans or whether humans.
Well,
Yeah.
It's certainly not good. It's certainly not good. But I think his point is that we triumph, we
Yeah.
flourish. But yeah,
Yeah,
certainly, certainly we passed the ideal number.
we might be the turkey the day before Thanksgiving.
I mean, there could be an argument that's illogical to have this many humans. I mean, that,
Yeah.
maybe
It's
we
certainly.
should have-
It's, I mean,
Yeah.
there's.
Well-
I would say it's more than an argument. I mean, that's
Yeah.
certainly true. But it's, we don't do it because we chose to necessarily.
But
Well,
still, we
the-
have logic which tells us this probably is not a good idea to have so many of us.
the in my thinking, the chart that illustrates this is not a smooth incline. It's a jagged roller coaster ride.
Yeah.
So yeah, this goes back to, is the world changing? And we could go down this conversation again too. I'd be happy to do it, but it goes back to conversation. Over the long run, is the world progressing for the better? And most people say yes. I think probably yes.
Everybody except Bruno.
But
that wasn't my point the other day. I was just pointing out that it depends on how you look at things, and it's not that clear cut.
Yeah, I kind of wonder. Well, think about it. Let's say, so here's a philosophy experiment. Here's a philosophical mind experiment. Suppose that we end up having a nuclear war, and then everything gets wiped out. If that's true, then for every technological advancement, if you ask the question, was it for the better? The answer might be no, right? Now that's a super extreme, super out there analogy, but that's just like
It's not that crazy though. I mean, it's
Yeah.
extreme, but it's not.
It's
if you-
technologically possible.
It's very much possible. That's the problem. So it's extreme, but it's not very unlikely.
It's not super unlikely. Or
no.
AI, you know,
No,
Elon
'cause-
Musk, he's
Look, because if there were not an atomic war, we would likely unleash upon ourselves like an incredible amount of destruction. I mean, that's fairly obvious. And we've only had it.
I got a little lost here.
Mhm.
If we were to have a nuclear war,
Yeah.
are you saying that means then that the automobile was not a good thing?
Possibly, because we can't control our own instinct. Like maybe, yeah. I don't.
Is there a connection between the automobile and nuclear weapons?
Because the automobile led to new technology, which led to new technology, which led to nuclear weapons.
Well, is there any
I
such
wouldn't
thing as
do
a
it that
purely
way.
good technology?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's a very far out.
I would
But-
say it's human intellect that led to all these technologies.
But when you create a technology, do you have to account for human intellect? Like you say, it's not the fault of the technology; it's the fault of us.
But no,
but-
you have to. Well, you know, like atomic. It's different. The automobile and atomic weapons are obviously different. Nobody like automobiles. You know, people were happy about them. But I think, like from the beginning, people were very unhappy with atomic weapons. The people that created the atomic weapons in the first place weren't happy that was created for humankind, you know, because it's obvious that it's a weapon that works. Like if you're trying to defeat the Nazis, which is really why it was created, you wanted to have that weapon before the Nazis. But obviously, you know, if you have half a brain, you realize that if we actually use those weapons in the future, it's going to be bad for humankind. So from the beginning, like intelligent people came up with this technology. Intelligent people realized how bad it was.
I'd be a devil's advocate though and say that, well, so far, I would think that if we didn't have the nuclear arsenals that the superpowers had, we would be mired in just really endless war, more endless than what we have right now. You know?
Right. Yeah, we
That-
probably
that-
would have had another world war. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
then
been a
we might
theory.
be, you know, and so we don't know if in the future it was a mistake.
In other words, if you could go back in time and kill Hitler, who's to say it would be better?
There's no way not.
Yeah.
Well,
That's
we
true.
don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
the only thing that we can say is that the potential is a potential of
Is
enormous
there.
destruction.
Yeah.
But how can we predict the future, right? I mean, nobody here is a magician or like
Right.
a witch or something like that. I don't know. We can't see the future, you know.
Yeah.
My
So-
clairvoyantron is broke.
Yeah. So I mean, we can't say that. I mean,
But
it's
we're not.
possible,
We can
but
extrapolate.
we can talk about the potential.
Certain
There's
trends.
enormous potential for destruction. There's potential for an amount of destruction that humankind has never seen, right? So
Well-
that's what we can say.
I have a question related to that, to, you know, warfare that could end humanity. Let's say you're the guy with the finger on the button in the United States. You have the keys or whatever activates it.
Trump was
For-
that guy for the last 4 years.
No, for the
Think about
president, the guy who has the other key that's needed to activate it. And so here comes a nuclear strike, and it's already up in the air. You know it's on its way down. You know that your job is to allow the launching of the retaliatory US strike, right? And you know that if you do that, if that happens, then not just one side of the world, but all over the, all humanity all over the world will disappear. Will you say, well,
We're not
already
talking
lo-
about raising kids anymore, are we?
Yeah,
No.
I know. Will you say just the fact that they've launched their missiles, all of us have already lost? And I want to at least humanity to survive, maybe from go back to the Stone Age. So I'm going to sabotage the retaliatory nuclear strikes.
Right, and that's been a question. I mean, that's been, I mean, a theory about whether humans could actually do that. And
Yeah,
even if you
Yeah.
know that you're dead, I mean, the argument has always been, well, you're dead, so you might as well take them out with you.
right.
But then if you're talking about, well, this means the end of humanity. Because yeah, even under scenario first strike, well, maybe the Russians still survive, and to acknowledge that the Russians are still humans, at least humanity will be there.
Right. And so that's I kind of thought about that because of that Russian colonel who disregarded the what his panel said was a nuclear strike from the US, and it was turned out to be a faulty diode or something in his surveillance system. But because I think the humans are the only species to worry about the species and no one else. No other species does that thinks about.
They're probably
the
not.
survival.
They're not smart.
Well,
enough.
I don't know
Yeah,
about
they're not
that.
smart enough, period. Yeah.
I think to some extent every species thinks about the propagation of the species. They just don't think about the way we do.
hmm
Yeah, it's instinct.
Yeah.
They think about
They
it-
think about the propagation of their own, well, not just their cells, but if it's an ant colony or a
I mean,
native mole rat.
clearly sacrifice themselves to make sure they propagate.
Yeah. But yeah, just something I think about once in a while.
But I mean, yeah, if you look at the ant mentality, certainly they would engage in genocidal war if that was the
Yeah.
fact they do.
Right.
Ant colonies engage in genocidal war is that
hmm
they just end up destroying both colonies.
And yeah, and
Oh,
like another
oh.
thing, it doesn't have to necessarily be the survival of the species as a whole, but sometimes it can be like for example, David talked about the invention of the automobile, and of course, cars contribute to global warming, and but now we're coming out with electric cars, of course, so that might be an improvement. But basically, the whole idea of using oil to run factories and machines and stuff contributes to global warming. So like, is the discovery of how to do that bad for society? Now, if we did it responsibly and we did it in a controlled manner and we had more laws around it, then maybe it wouldn't be bad. But we don't. We couldn't resist the urge. There's too much money in oil, right? Once the cat's out of the bag and we realize how much money there is to be made on this thing, it's very hard to influence the politics in the right direction, right?
I know that we all know the people who were involved in this, but set that aside for a moment. The person or the people who invented light bulbs did not make money selling candles.
Yeah.
They invented the light bulb to provide light,
Right.
and they did it for a profit.
Yeah.
And
No, that was
I
Edison.
think that was a good thing.
Edison was very much into profit.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. The question is, what if there's like so much money? What if there's like a lot of money in things that are not? So the light bulb is kind of a harmless invention as far as I know. It has benefits and the downsides. There's some arguments, artificial light's not as good as natural light, or you don't
Well,
get vitamin D.
No,
But that's
it was
yeah.
better than gaslight, which was
It's
the
better than,
standard
yeah,
at that
it's
time.
pretty
Yeah.
harmless.
I,
Yeah.
I don't know if you could successfully, assuming you could go back in time
Yeah.
to the invention of the automobile, which the first cars were electric. There's
Yeah.
an irony
First
for you.
with steam.
And well, yeah, maybe steam. But the internal combustion engine car,
Right.
I don't think if you could travel in time that you would be very successful at
Yeah.
persuading people about the dangers of fossil fuels
Right.
at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They would say, well, that's far in the future. But the problem is once the cat's out of the bag and there's enough money in it. So see, sometimes there's not that much money in it, or sometimes we're acutely aware of what the issues are and we rush to fix it before. But for some things, when the cat's out of the bag, it's very hard to put it back in. So like,
Oh, you can never unlearn something that's been learned, or and you're
yeah,
just
so
hoping
like
that
with
something.
oil, once
Yeah, that's-
once the money gets big enough, it's hard to influence the politics.
Yeah,
That's the thing.
we just hope that something better comes along.
Well,
Yeah.
there is change. I mean, again,
Yeah.
we used
The-
leaded oil before. It was relatively not that long ago when we put lead in everything.
Yeah.
I mean, if you have political will, you can change that. It's just a matter of it's just a matter of making the changes. I mean, the money is really not in oil. I would make the argument the money is in energy, which
Right.
is different. Oil is a form of energy, but if you replace that, with look at Tesla, look at how well
Yeah.
it's doing and how
Right.
I know there are other factors, but look at how expensive the stock has gotten, and that's probably just the beginning. I mean, because a bunch of like big car makers are now trying to get into that game as well, and they are getting into that game. So you can make those transitions. The problem is you're always going to have a pushback, from the people that already have the power, that already have the money, because obviously they don't want to become dinosaurs. They don't want to go extinct. They don't want to lose their power, their money, even though it's good for society. I mean, for society, it's much better for us to have electric than to have,
Right.
fossil fuels destroying the planet. But that doesn't mean that even if you or me were in that position, that we have all that power or and money, we probably wouldn't let it go. I mean, humans are not particularly good at that. So that's why you have to make those decisions in favor of society, not in favor of a certain few.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
There's
and-
embedded interest.
yeah, but the thing is, if I would think, and this is what I don't understand, why aren't the oil companies the biggest investors in alternative energy?
They actually invest quite a bit. They're
Yeah,
true, but it's hard to give up when they built up that much infrastructure.
right, but that's sunk cost. I mean,
Uh,
The
If
smart
somebody else-
ones will do it. The smart
Yeah,
ones will do it.
if
but
somebody else
I
invents,
wasn't really talking about candles and light bulbs.
yeah.
Yeah.
If somebody invents something that supersedes fossil fuels, then all those infrastructure that the oil companies built will become worthless in the blink of an eye, and so you better make yourself obsolete before somebody else does it for you.
Well, but it's hard. I
Yeah.
mean, you look at AT&T, not the AT&T that exists now,
Right?
the AT&T that existed in the 80s.
Yeah.
Yeah, what happened to them? They got broken up.
Yeah.
I mean, well, one, the government broke them up too, and that was probably a good thing. But that's it.
Blockbuster, Tower Records.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, or Zenith,
Yeah. I mean, I think it's human nature to be
or
attached,
IBM. Yeah,
to be attached to whatever it is that made you rich or prosperous. It's so hard to it's very few companies reinvent themselves, which is make themselves obsolete.
I
think-
just I just
I-
heard a piece recently. Sorry if I interrupt, but I'll shut up in a second. But let me just say this: I listened to a piece very recently. It was on Minnesota Public Radio, and they were talking about Kodak. And it was a big company, right? Not so long ago.
Yeah.
And people think, well, Kodak, well, including myself, Kodak, they just didn't adapt, to the new technology. They just went extinct because they kept using this whole technology, and they just didn't they didn't keep up with the advancement in technology. That's actually not true. And I didn't know that, but they did adapt, and they were actually pioneers in the
Right. They
development
developed the digital
Yeah.
camera technology.
of digital. But the problem is that they didn't really want to
No.
change their business model, because they thought, well, that's not our business model. We're
Yeah.
doing so well. So I think Kodak was a little bit like these oil companies,
Right.
they had the money, they had the influence, they had the power, and they were comfortable. But you can only postpone things for so long, at
Yes.
some point, people were like, hey, digital is a lot easier. Let's go with this. And if you're not willing to adapt, you end up losing customers, and you end up out of the game.
Yeah.
And
You
in
know-
energy, I think the
you
same
know,
thing is going to happen.
Along those lines, Tesla is now the most valuable car company on earth.
Yes.
They have passed Ford, GM, Chrysler, Toyota, everybody.
Thanks to Hertz, they passed $1 trillion.
Yeah.
But their actual profit is almost non-existent.
It's kind of ridiculous.
I mean, in
It's
terms of actual
absolutely
earnings, yeah.
ridiculous.
And-
It's
and-
absolutely-
GM is still the
However-
biggest company in terms of,
Yeah.
or Toyota is probably the biggest company. In
I
terms
mean, I did this exercise, and this was about a few months ago. So they were in a $1 trillion company. I took their market, what you call this, market value,
Capitalization.
Capitalization. Yeah.
and then I lined up all the different car companies from largest to smallest, not capitalization, outstanding value,
Revenue and
N-
yeah.
I forget the term, the value of the stock that's outstanding, the value of the company, and lined them up. I think the top 7 or 8 who produce about 8 million cars a year or something, or maybe even more, have value, their total value is equivalent to Tesla. So that gives you an idea of how overvalued Tesla is, or how undervalued the other car companies are. So
Yeah.
I
Tesla is incredibly overvalued, as overvalued as any company has ever been.
yeah.
But the point is still, these companies, either Tesla or other companies, Tesla seems to be the front
Oh
runner.
yeah.
But
No, Tesla are not the ones who are going to get burned by the overvaluation. It's the people who
the
bought the stock.
investors, obviously.
Yeah.
Right, but that's the point that we don't know. I mean, if you look at Amazon,
Yeah, but that's not even the point. Like, the point is that this technology is coming, and eventually they will have to adapt, and they are adapting. I think the big car companies, they're not stupid. I mean, they're
Oh yeah, they're all
intelligent
shifting
people.
to
They-
electric.
Yeah, they're adapting, but the
And
problem with
they're more
oil,
efficient manufacturers than Tesla.
yeah, but the problem with oil is that they do have a lot of power and influence.
Yeah.
And they right now, I think it will change eventually, but right now their strategy is like, let's make sure the decision makers stay on our side, and they keep making the decisions that will keep us in the game, even if
Yeah.
that's not what makes sense for society at large.
no, certainly, yeah, the oil companies want to prolong
Yeah.
there. I mean, but I'm pretty sure the executives so I mean, ExxonMobil's put in, billions of dollars into develop that they know the end will come at some point, but they're going to try to forestall it as long as they
Yeah.
can.
Yeah. Which makes sense to a certain extent, right? They have to report to people, and taking risks is never easy, and changing someone's the company's business model when it's a, multi-billion-dollar company, I imagine it's not an easy proposition ever.
But no, yeah, that's why new companies spring up, because it's hard to.
The
make,
one thing that makes it easy for the oil
change.
companies to do what they're doing is that the costs are not the costs, but the bad effects are external to them, and so it's not a cost to them that you know, we have global warming. Global warming affects everyone, and so
It may be external to one,
yeah.
but not the aggregate of all of their activity,
Oh, yeah,
because that's going to affect all of them
right.
as it's going to affect us.
Hmm.
Right, but this has been a problem, quote, with late stage capitalism, is that you have private profits with socialized
Costs.
risk or social
Risk,
damage. So
yeah.
from the
Yeah,
corporation's
true.
point of view, is they exist to maximize profits. Whatever happens after that, well, that's society's problem. That's
Right, and efforts to privatize all these external costs and damage is being stymied, you know, because the oil companies are lobbying against them, these laws, and you know.
well, it's difficult too, and it's easy to paint just saying this is just about oil company greed, but
No.
forget. I mean, these companies are huge. They employ millions of people.
Right.
There's many not just cities economies depend upon them. I mean, coming from Houston, yeah, I realize what it is, but if you look at like what's happened, like West Virginia with coal, and coal's a dead end technology, that said clearly the loss of coal has devastated many economies, many local economies. And so that makes it hard for politicians. It's not just saying, well, we're just giving you campaign money. There is an actual cost associated with the transfer of technology. It's an easy argument to just make, well, this is just about greed. Yes, greed certainly plays a factor, but it's also that transition is how do you mediate that without causing,
Right.
because yeah,
Yeah, I heard it was I think it was on the radio as well, and it was an interesting debate because there was this professor from the US, some university, or Canada, I think it was actually Canada, and she was like making the argument that, well, we need to basically it's counterproductive to stay with coal and gas and that stuff, we have to like cut it off immediately and just completely replace it right away. That was basically like the general argument. And but that's how I used to think. But then the other guy, the British guy, pointed out, well, that's actually not true. Like the governments that are having the most success in doing the transition, and Britain's actually at least according to this guy, I think he was a policymaker of some sort, and he was but the numbers that he gave, right, I think were very impressive. Well, the one way he put it was that Britain now they've advanced quite a bit in terms of curtailing their emissions and all that, and now they're producing basically less pollution than they were in the 19th century, which is a crazy, or during Queen's Victoria period. So and partially the way they're being able to do this transition is by, like you're saying, Sasheer, right? You need to give people a little bit of time to transition, but at the same time, you need to have that plan in place, right? So you need to know that, well, that's just the middle period, but at the same time, you're working towards reducing it more and more, but you can't cut it off completely, because also you lose the political will, right? Because then you're going to have populists that are going to say, well, you're taking away all the jobs, right? And people are just going to be impoverished. So you need kind of like a plan of transition. That's the way I think it makes the most sense.
By the way, sorry, unrelated, but David, are you in a hotel room or in vacation or something?
I am. I'm traveling.
Nice.
I'm in a hotel close to the airport that I'm flying out of in the morning.
Cool.
David is an international man of mystery.
Austin, Texas, not international.
Austin, Texas.
Also, and this.
Oh,
I'm
are you
not-
going to go visit Elon Musk? Because I think that's where he is now,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, it is.
so even get on
And Joe Rogan.
podcast.
You can go smoke weed with both of them.
Joe Rogan. What's his name? Aaron Rodgers, health advisor.
Right, yeah.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
But what were you gonna say, Raul?
Pardon? Oh, what was I about? I mean, the thing about some advocates of clean energy, and I'm far from being opposed to clean energy, is that people have come up with, actually these are the numbers, and this is what you have to produce to actually replace fossil fuels without cratering the economy. And so it's counterproductive. It doesn't make sense to just say shut down whatever this source of energy or that source of energy. You can't, there's just no capacity. And even if you're going to build windmills, then you need a network, your energy storage system, you have to upgrade it as well, and all sorts of things. And so I just want to see a sane, I haven't seen it laid out. This is the transition. This is what we need to do. And maybe I haven't read enough in a time frame, because
apparently Europe is doing a pretty good job, because I read that as well. I didn't know, but the European Union is actually doing in the UK as well, because now they're not in the European Union, but they're doing a pretty good job with the transition. So it can be done,
right?
But you need the political will to do it.
Yeah, you also need the funding. I was reading about fusion energy. The technology that was just around the corner for about 30 years now. It's just around the corner, but they
More
were
than
saying,
that.
yeah. They were saying, some of the advocates are saying, if the government did something like the Manhattan Project for fusion energy, he said, I think our chances of having a thriving fusion energy industry will be much higher. He was saying, like, when we were working on this, we said we need $9 billion a year to do all the development that's needed on electromagnets and all that, and they got $1 billion a year, and said that's not going to get us near enough. We won't be able to find out the things that we need to find out and develop the things that we need to develop to be able to get fusion energy within a time frame before global warming, basically.
I could have as much success as Lawrence Livermore with $1 billion, as they have had.
Yeah, but it isn't a lot. I mean, that's the problem. Fusion has been, you can create fusion. It's just not
right
to do
Doesn't
it on a
last very long.
scale that you can get.
Yeah,
a useful.
but the development has to be in low temperature superconductors and all those things. I mean, I'm talking as if I know about these things. I just repeat what I read. But you look historically, money does accelerate technological development. Like, look at the COVID vaccines. When we started, they had no idea how to go about doing that. Well, maybe they had a glimmer in somebody's mind. And the atomic bomb, the same thing. And in Germany, when they were being bombed to smithereens, that's when the most advanced ideas on submarines and jet engines and rocketry came out.
Well, war is a great innovator of technology. War and greed are the two greatest innovators of technology.
Desperation.
I guess our challenge is to.
Go ahead, David.
Go ahead, David.
I guess our challenge is to figure out how to progress without killing each other.
I don't think it's just not killing each other. So definitely that, yes.
No, I was talking about war being the catalyst. before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I said, I don't think it's war, it's desperation.
Yeah, because COVID is not war, but you
Yeah,
know
yeah.
we're all like in
Yeah.
trouble, and people
Mhm.
certainly got the incentive
Now,
to
did-
do what hadn't
did-
been done before.
Did you see the interview with the Portuguese general that headed up the vaccine program in Portugal and to great success?
No,
He described it as a war.
right,
Oh
Right.
no, yeah, it is.
yeah,
Actually, I was surprised the other day because you know Portugal is I think is the second most vaccinated country in the world. So that was a little bit of a surprising. Maybe that's why
Yeah.
you know because they saw it as a war. You know, and that's how they faced it. And yeah, but I was.
Well, I mean, the U.S. military has said global warming is an existential threat.
mhm,
From the military standpoint, is yes, and the military's actually been doing stuff to actually make themselves more, not necessarily stop global warming, but deal with better. You know, they've started to develop more fuel efficient
right,
weapon systems, basically.
just be more
I mean,
resilient.
if we're reasonable, yeah, that's how we need to see it. But there's a lot of people that are not reasonable.
Right.
Yeah.
But you
Well,
gotta look at like
I-
DARPA, like the internet, it was developed under DARPA.
It's like it's like the White Walkers in Game of Thrones. You know.
Yeah.
That-
I believe that
they
we
end
have
the whole
to.
thing.
I believe we should, as much as we possibly can, try to learn about and exploit alternative sources of clean energy.
Yeah.
At the same time, I know people who they talk about ways to save energy, and it's somehow or other their vision of the future as successful is using less energy. But I think that's wrong. I think in the future we're going to need more energy, and we just have to figure out how to make it better.
Well, it's both, but I mean, technology, in addition to finding new ways of generating power, technology is, I mean, our car now is so much more fuel efficient than what it was even 10 years ago. It just happens to be that one, we have a lot more people. Once you start finding we can make things more efficient, well, then we're gonna start loading up our cars with more features. But that said, yeah, the Honda I drive now is larger than my Honda Civic that I had that I bought in the early 2000s. That said, it actually gets about the same gas mileage. It could actually get more, except that they put on it's bigger, it's got more features, it's got like all-wheel drive, and so
Yeah,
we've
I-
definitely
I-
squeezed.
I understand what you're saying, but what I'm thinking about is our countries that don't have much energy, that maybe have homes with dirt floors.
Mhm.
Right.
And my understanding is that having electricity reduces infant mortality by 75%.
Oh yeah.
And- And if we want to have more people survive beyond 5 years of age, we're going to need more energy in the future.
Mhm.
And we need to make it cleaner than we do now, but we're going to need more energy, not less.
Right.
Well, here's the interesting part about third world countries is that they're actually in some ways, the best position to capitalize on new technologies because they don't have the embedded infrastructure.
Yeah, they can leapfrog right over us. Yeah.
If you look at phone service in third world countries, it's essentially all cell phones. They basically leapfrogged. I mean, yeah, if we went there like 20 years ago, yeah, they were dealing with crappy landlines, but now everybody's got a cell phone. They've basically leaplined, because we went from putting copper down, then to putting fiber optics. They basically just leapfrogged that and just gone to doing cell towers. And it makes sense because it's cheaper to put up cell towers and build a cell network than it is to even put fiber optics in the
Lay
ground
down copper.
or on towers.
Yeah.
So they're in position if you can get them to build decentralized, using wind, solar, stuff like that. Many of these countries, and many of them are in tropical areas, are actually much better suited to it than, say, the US, or what would be the worst conditions, like someplace like Belarus or something, where you've got a lot of embedded old infrastructure
Mhm.
that you're still trying to milk out of. Because in a place like, like Haiti, let's say, well, Haiti's got other problem, but maybe find another country, but like Ecuador or someplace, well, you don't have a lot of embedded infrastructure. So as long as you can get the new technology, you could just leapfrog over
Yeah.
building, a bunch of giant,
Mhm.
coal or, oil plants, and build, a bunch of, solar and wind farms.
Right. I mean, wind farms, are they now economically on a par with just the average cost per kilowatt hour, for example?
I'm not sure
I'm
that
never
they,
clear on that.
I'm
because,
not sure that they are.
Yeah.
I can't remember which one, but one of the Kennedys, I think it's one of Ted Kennedy's nephews or something. I can't remember. He was talking about solar energy, wind farms, and with a natural gas supplement, for days when it's not windy.
Mhm.
And he said, in reality, those are natural gas plants, and they have wind as
As a backup.
as a
Supplement.
They're promoting this the wrong way around. So
Right, that was kind of T. Boone Pickens' vision. But I mean, again, stuff like that's transitory. That said,
Yeah.
the end goal is to build up the wind infrastructure. Well, I don't think it's a bad idea necessarily to still have gas plants. I mean, that's your transition there.
Right.
Eventually, the idea is you start phasing out the gas.
It's so hard to avoid gas. Like, even with electric cars, I've heard that like the amount of so you have to generate the electricity to charge the car. And I've
Right.
heard the amount of gas that you need to generate that electricity is about half of the gas that you would normally use. And then plus disposing of the electric battery, I guess, yeah, I don't know about this, but I read something else that to dispose of the electric battery like takes gas too. But
Oh yeah, no,
I-
none of this is panacea.
I am sure that
Yeah.
the wind technology, the battery technology, the solar technology, that all of that is no more sophisticated now than the recording industry was in 1910.
Yes.
Yeah. But in the future,
It
hopefully it'll get
takes some time to
Yeah.
grow expertise.
No, it's gonna
and
get better.
understand the physics involved and all of that.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's plateaued. Electricity, hopefully,
No. Yeah.
hopefully electric cars someday will not use.
Yeah. And so I think we should explore wind, but we don't really know if wind is the ultimate be all, of energy. It's clean, but it's not cheap.
Yeah.
And
Well,
Yeah.
yeah. There's
will it ever be cheap? We don't know, but I think we should try.
Yeah.
right, but there's no single solution. This is the
No,
problem that people think is that,
that's the thing. It has to be, all of the above.
right, yeah, it's multiple
Right.
solutions.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting that it is a single solution.
Yeah. But
I mean, I'll be honest. I think right now, given the technology that we have, we could drop fossil fuels. That could happen. The problem is it's not a matter of having the technology. It's a matter of having the infrastructure to do it. We just don't have the infrastructure. And there's too many embedded interest.
And looking at energy, in France and Great Britain, I think, but definitely France and Germany, they have really put a lot of effort into developing their nuclear energy capacity.
Right.
And I think some cautions are in order with that. But at the same time, I almost wonder if the pendulum has swung too far, because since 1982, there have been two
Two plants.
nuclear power plants in the United States.
Yes.
And that's too few.
Right.
If you
Yeah. But
ask me.
nuclear, again, there's a lot of people who push it, but
Yeah.
it's not cheap to build a nuclear power plant. Even if you could, it's still, but again, there's still the question of what do you do with the waste? And as we saw with Fukushima, which was an advanced nuclear power plant, is when they go wrong, they go very wrong.
Yes, but if you
Worst
if
case
you-
scenario of
if-
nuclear power is, now,
Yeah. Yeah. However, my understanding is that if you add up the illness and death caused by nuclear power and compare that to the illness and death caused by burning fossil fuels, there is no comparison.
oh, sure, it's not, but that's a matter of scale. That's like saying the amount of deaths caused by automobiles versus the amount of deaths caused by machine guns in the US. It's not close. Automobiles just kill, but that's not a function that machine guns aren't deadly. It's just there's way more cars than there are.
No, I
machine
thought the numbers were based on deaths per kilowatt hour produced or something.
Yeah, but that's still the same. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
There is a factor to it, but
Right.
And it's
You know.
something to consider, but it's also, you have to look, if you look at Chernobyl, that
Yeah.
things can get like really, really bad,
Right.
So,
I mean,
so
that's a political
okay.
calculation. Yeah.
And
yeah,
formal,
then you have to calculate.
yeah, once you
Just-
scale up that many nuclear plants to how many coal plants we have,
just an
the chances of
informal,
it. Sorry, go ahead.
just an informal poll among us here. What is your impression of how many people were killed at Chernobyl? Either on the day of or in the years following?
Aftermath.
Yeah.
I think
know
the
very
day
little
of
about
it
it.
was less than 100, if I remember correctly. I haven't seen the TV series, so I don't know. But I think in the aftermath, I don't think that's been determined, but there were cancer clusters, certainly. Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me if that's in the thousands.
Yeah, I think I would say 10,000 or something like that. But a lot of people didn't die, but had like long-term health issues. It wasn't just about dying. Yeah, a lot of people had like very serious issues their whole lives, like cancer and stuff like that.
Okay, so Bruno says about 10,000.
So I don't have a number, but it's interesting. I read a story about like so a biologist.
Oh, do you know David?
Brett Weinstein.
It's a lot less than 10,000.
Mhm.
So there's one biologist that he said like 70% of fish they've examined, and the fish had like radiation from the atomic bomb, or like 70% of the fish that we eat. And it's not like a lot, but like he won't eat any fish because of that.
Well, he
I
should
don't
not
eat
breathe
any
air
fish either, but not for that reason.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, but that's the key. No, you're right. Yeah, I've heard the number is not. It's not like millions of people died. But that said, obviously in the initial disaster, it was bad, but it wasn't like it didn't wipe out Kiev. I mean, that said, we won't forget that the only Chernobyl
Well-
didn't come known to the rest of the world except in Sweden. They were detecting the radiation, so the
I-
cloud
I-
was pretty big.
I think the thing that troubles me is in the days following the Chernobyl disaster, that headlines all over the world estimated that the dead at anywhere from 100,000 to 1 million.
Right.
And it was nowhere near that. And it's okay if you think something could be really bad, but it's irresponsible I think, to say millions will die from this. That was not right to do that.
Well, again, we'd have to go back and look at, what were the factors. I mean, would that be alarmist? Yes, that's alarmist to a certain extent, but is the possibility, could there be there if it really just kept on melting down?
Now, I'm not talking about people like you and me. I'm talking about people who run a newspaper who have taken on the responsibility of informing the public
Sure.
about issues that are important.
Mhm.
And to exaggerate to meet your agenda is not a good thing, no matter what your agenda or how noble. To say something that you know is not true in order to further your agenda is wrong.
Again, I'm not going to deny that they were probably alarmist. I mean, I was alive when Chernobyl happened. I just wasn't that old, so I can't act like. And just was that, again, what were the factors that went in? I won't deny media is sensationalized. They'll sensationalize it to a certain extent, but whether the possibility that many people could have died from Chernobyl, I don't know. If you consider where it was located, what the prevailing winds were, how bad the meltdown was. And it didn't, not the whole thing didn't melt down. I mean, it was one reactor. It wasn't, and what were there, like 4 in Chernobyl?
Yeah.
I don't know.
like
I don't
that.
know.
That said, you still can't go to, well, you can go to Chernobyl. You probably wouldn't want to spend a lot of time there.
No.
I mean, this is the problem, is that the after effects are, but it's been like almost 40 years.
Right.
But
Yeah,
we
I
look
just
at like
remember that.
It's not
Fukushima.
just the people that die. I mean, the whole area is basically
yeah.
affected, and
Sure,
it won't go
sure.
away. I mean, this is
Yeah.
almost forever. So,
Yeah.
uh,
I
and,
mean,
and it's a big area too. It's very
Right.
big.
but
And by the way, I just read on Wikipedia. It says some studies say from 9 to 16,000 fatalities in Europe. So I mean, it's still a considerable number. This is just people that died,
right from
but
from,
a lot more people got sick.
from illnesses that um
Yeah,
but but Chernobyl is an old nuclear power plant design, right? What about these, supposedly the breeder reactors and the sodium reactors are a lot safer,
The traveling wave reactor.
yeah, than the old Edward Teller reactors. And it's basically Edward Teller who shut down research on what would it be the safer nuclear reactors, because he wanted to build submarines as fast as possible.
Right. Yeah.
Is there no research there, or do people don't see any future for it? People who make the decisions.
There is research and there is hope. I know Bill Gates has put a lot of money into research in the
Mhm.
traveling wave reactor.
Yeah, he's
Mhm.
just inventing some. Yeah, nuclear is certainly out there. It's just,
Yeah.
I think safety still, there's good reason for it to be safe. I mean, it's
Absolutely. Well,
Right.
I think one
that translates to
factor,
money.
one
Yeah,
factor is for a lot of people in history, their first exposure to nuclear power was a nuclear weapon,
Mhm.
Right.
not electricity. And we might feel differently about it now if our first exposure to nuclear power were to produce electricity for homes and businesses rather than to blow up Nagasaki and Hiroshima.
Yeah.
Oh, sure. Yeah. But that's saying, your first experience towards rockets are, I'm going to think about your
V1.
rocketry developing under war.
but
Now we use it to
it's-
send up satellites. Or,
See, but that is solvable with political will, because in Japan, the public information system, they were able to get people to separate in their minds nuclear power plants from the nuclear bomb, and there wasn't much there still is, of course, but there wasn't much opposition to nuclear power plants in Japan, but well, not anymore now after.
Right.
Fukushima.
Yeah. After Fukushima,
You
they've
know,
not
but-
built.
But it's doable if you have a safer technology. And my point is, we should. It should be a national emergency developing these different technologies, and rather than the trillions of dollars that were wasted on Afghanistan and Iraq. So
If
my
people were
God.
rational, if decision making was rational, I mean,
That's the problem. Yeah.
well, we just saw this week, they signed this huge, I'm sure you guys saw that they signed this huge infrastructure bill, and
Right.
a lot of money is going into updating the infrastructure
Mhm.
in the United States, which was sorely needed. And the Republicans that agree with this bill are being like heavily targeted, apparently, and they're being called
Right.
traitors and
Yeah.
receiving death threats
Yeah.
because they did something that they believe is in the best interest of the country. I mean, like that shows you that it's not like that's not a workable system, the system that they have right now, because either side of the aisle, if they work with the basically the other side, this is the
Right.
problem. There are only two sides, right? So it's us against them. So if they work with the other side, they are attacked by their constituents, and then people complain that they can't do anything.
Yeah.
Right.
But it's in situations like this, you understand why they can't do anything.
Yeah.
So it's a vicious cycle, but it basically doesn't work. Like
And
whatever's happening right now, it certainly is broken. It doesn't
Yeah.
work.
The
Well, there was-
basic principle is if you're for it, then I'm against it.
Exactly.
Right. There's a
Just
zero-sum
because.
game view of this.
Just because.
There's no even logic to it. It's just basically I oppose it because you're for it and I don't like you.
It's like
Right. Yeah. It's zero-sum.
and they're being called traitors, like this is something that is a little bit puzzling to me. Like traitor to whom?
The party.
Of the
Well, I can tell you
party?
what's gonna.
Like they're supposed to represent the people, right? So like they would be traitors if they were betraying the nation.
Well, I'll tell you what's going to make it more ridiculous is that you're going to have politicians who are going to show up who voted against the bill, who show up for groundbreaking.
Right. Yeah.
And there's already one congressman, I forgot, I think in Texas, already tweeted
Yeah.
about saying
Yeah.
how much money is going to come to, his district, even though he voted against the
Voted
bill.
against the
He's
bill.
saying, well, yeah, we're going to get this bridge fixed. And I did this. So you're going to get a bunch of politicians who voted against it, yet will still campaign on it.
It's a dysfunctional system, right?
Yes, it is. There's no doubt about it.
So when you're expecting logic to come from these decisions, you got to realize that it's not a logical system.
No.
No, I got to say this for people who live in Minneapolis. I mean, Ilhan Omar voted against the bill, even though she's for most of it and she's for a lot of it. Yet she still did and it's not because she's not a Republican, obviously, but because she thought it would lose leverage towards moderates to vote for a larger bill. I mean, that's the kind of craziness. Even though this bill has a lot of stuff she pushed.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
It's-
crazy as well. But it's a crazy system. I mean, I guess that's a different discussion. Also, our time is up. But
Right. Yeah, I think gotta call it here.
anyways, but it was a good discussion tonight.
Yeah,
We
so
touched
much about
on-
raising kids.
Right, yeah. Yeah, we got raising kids to talking about nuclear weapons. So
Well, if you care about your kids, right? Then
Right.
Well, maybe raising kids is just easy, and so it's not even worth. talking
It's
about.
not easy, man. It's not.
It's not
easy.
easy.
It's not easy, but it's not, don't be too scared by it. You just need
We
to
we
be
need
a reasonable person.
we need
It's
a
not
little-
easy, but it's worth it.
Yeah.
It's worth it, but we need a different
Mhm.
approach maybe to that discussion. We
Right,
need
yeah.
to. Sometimes you have to find a different angle, but it's those are interesting questions.
Okay, thanks, Bruno. That was a good.
yep,
chat.
thank you, Bruno.
Yeah.
Thanks for showing up, guys, and
Have a
thank
good night,
you
guys.
for,
Nice to see you
for
guys.
watching.